if somebody else jumps in, I'm not going to backtrack and start from the beginning, but we'll try to customize this for what you guys need to a little bit, but I want to keep it general enough that we can use this on like YouTube and other places. So I don't mind. We'll be able to take questions and stuff like that. So if you do have anything that pops up or whatever, just unmute and ask me, or stop me for a second if I'm in the middle of something.
Okay.
If you have any questions as we're going, then just let me know. It's harder for me to check the chat when it's just me talking. So if you do have anything, maybe just unmute and say, hey, John, or something, get my attention somehow. So,
okay.
Hey, real quick before I do dive into what I'm going to talk about, do you guys use the rate matrix, and do you have smart maps on your account? Do you do any of this stuff already?
I have smart maps, but the rate matrix is something that I don't wholly understand. But anything to systemize my pricing would be a welcomed guest.
Okay. And what
because I have had some that I've priced online that did not go very, very well, because we get there and there's stuff that I've not accounted for in my pricing and that kind of thing. So
what kind of stuff? Do you mind me asking?
What was it? I want to think that the one we done at the time, I measured and I gave them a price, and then we got there and there was like a hill that hadn't been accounted for, that there was like a major incline, and we didn't account for it.
Okay. And so it took, like, you had to trim it instead of being able to mow it or something like that. Yeah. Okay. And some of that, and we'll talk a little bit about that, being able to change your terms on your.
Did you catch all that?
No, we got muted partway through. Sorry.
I've lost something.
Can you hear me, Thad? Hey, Thad, I think we lost you.
Yeah, you did. I had a phone call come through, and for some reason it
muted you and switched off. Yeah, no, I caught the end of it. I missed the end of it. You were saying.
I was just saying that we went there. We ended up having to make a change with the crews to be able to carry the right, because I'm still lower end mowing wise. I don't have the perfect setup all the time.
Okay.
And so like one crew has to carry a push mower to kind of hit that stuff, and they were having to take that push. They didn't have that push mower, so it kind of got it just wasn't as good as I wish it would have been. Now we've been able to correct it since then, but it was just a bad go at first because everything wasn't prepared for.
Sure. Yeah. And so we'll talk about this closer to the end, but there's ways, and I'll suggest a few, but there's ways you can put that into your wording on your estimate proposal that should cover you for that, should you get there and there's unexpected things. That way you're not locked into a price. Maybe one time you mow it, but then, you tell them we're going to have to adjust it based on, and we're not trying to set this up so that you're baiting and switching people. And so we want to I'll try to equip you with some tools that'll give you that ability to look at properties and stuff to help try and see that. So, okay. Well, if it's good, if you got a starting point, obviously mowing services are probably the easiest to do. Fertilization, weed control stuff, anything that has a measurement. We'll look at different ones. And if there's something specific to you guys, we'll try to focus on that a little bit too. Okay.
Okay.
So just a little brief overview. I had the outline here. This is the kind of order of the way I plan to go through some stuff. So we'll look at how to obtain property data. There's a way you could do it with Google Earth. It's totally free. It's not as reliable, and it's reliable, but it's not as detailed, and you have to do a lot of manual work to do stuff with the data. Zillow will give you lot sizes as a good starting point. So we'll look at that real quick. And then we'll spend a bunch of the time looking at smart maps, how to use Service Autopilot's tool, the smart maps tool, to get the data. And then what do we do with it? So once we have data, and how do we compare that with already existing data? Hopefully you've been tracking like job times on existing customers. And what we can do is we can take some measurements of your existing customers and use those two data points to come up with formulas to figure out how much you should be charging per square foot or whatever the calculation needs to be, and go from there. And what happens if we don't have data? What services can we price this way? And then we'll dive right into building out some rate matrix stuff to be able to price your services and get some actual working numbers. I will more than likely, if it ends up just being us and you're cool with me keeping recording the screen, we may be able to use your actual data. I have a test account that I can use that we can build stuff in so we can play around. And even if we just want to have your screen up in the back, you have your screen up in the background and you can tell me exact numbers and different stuff, we could do it either way. I don't want to show your Service Autopilot on a recording that we might use on the internet later if you don't want that. So we can do it either way when we get closer to that. Just let me know, okay? All right, well then let's dive in. I'm going to move my outline to the side so I stay on track. But the first thing we're going to look at here is Google Earth. And so I had already selected, and I prepped all this so that I'd be ready, but I had selected a address here in Texas, 2102 Poppy Lane, because it's a lead in the system that I'm using. And so if you type that into the box and then click on places, it'll zoom in and go to that location. So you'll watch as we get blurry and gives ourselves a headache because it spins around. Some of the animation I think is a little it's a little necessary. But yeah, as you can see, it's a home in the middle of a giant neighborhood here in Texas. This is how they built all of these ones. I'm not exactly sure. Let me see some of the other road names. I don't know exactly where this is at. Berkner High School, Jupiter Road. Okay, Jupiter and Beltline, whatever. That part's not as important.
John, can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
I must have missed. So you're on Google Earth. You're not on the Smart Maps package, right?
Not yet. No, I'm just showing people how to get this data if they don't have smart maps.
Okay.
Just so that there's a couple of places you could use to get it if you aren't. Because some of the people, even some of our customers that we thought might be coming aren't using smart maps. And so I just wanted to show people really quickly that there is other ways to
Absolutely.
get the data. Yeah. So
okay.
It looks like a lot like it because Smart Maps uses Google's mapping API. And so there's some overlap here. You can click and drag. I don't remember. Yeah, some of the other buttons you have to be able to click to be able to move around. But if I click the little measurement, there's a little measure distance in areas icon over here. It flips up to the top down view. And I want to be able to, let me see. Uh-oh, no, don't do that. Shoot. I'm not a pro with Google Google Earth, to be totally honest. I use it and I've used it sparingly, but it's way harder to be kind of good with it. So let me see if I can stop it when it is on a straight on view, and then I'll zoom in. Keep going, keep going. All right, stop. There we go. So maybe that's what you got to do. You got to just click on it. And then we'll zoom way in. And then when I hit the measurement tool, it's going to move up here. And then you could just select starting points. So if we just want general area information, you can pull an area, right? And when you click on it, it tells you over here the perimeter is 118 meters, which we can change that to feet because we're in America. Square feet. So there's 388 perimeter feet. So if you're measuring, like, let's say, for instance, for a fence or anything like that, you could measure perimeters. You could do straight lines. So if you click out of there, you can reset it, start new. You could just do starting point to starting point, and it gives you the length, the distance. And if you say done, then it just calculates that distance. It gives you a point in the middle. So if you wanted to do move it a little bit and get midway points, and then if you click one, it splits it in half. So if you needed to move it, it's the same with the area one. So I'm going to start a new one. And let's say we wanted to be more specific with just turf areas. And so we would take out the general principles of the house. You have to remember to start at a spot where you're going to go around things. And I'll show you why that's key is you have this general area. If you remember before, it was 8,000 something square feet, I think, because it was accounting for the house. Well, now this one's 5,645 square feet with a perimeter of 623. So you can take measurements this way. You could copy them and paste them, but again, it's a lot of manual stuff. And that's why I want to focus on the smart maps things, is because you could spend a lot more time looking there. But this is a useful tool. Some people use it. It's totally free. I mean, you can measure it. Let's say you're doing something quick. You just want to do a driveway square footage for pressure washing or sidewalks for snow shoveling or whatever it is. You can do a lot with the Google Earth, and they let you do it free. Now, this isn't maps.google.com. This is literally Google Earth. It's a totally different thing than just like what you can search for, like regular Google, if you type in an address. So you have to go to Google Earth. earth.google.com, I guess. You have to go there, and that'll give you this tool, and you can use the pieces. There is some other map styles and different stuff you can change. I think one of them that was neat was, oops, sorry. You can see borders, labels. Let's see if that clicks. No. Let me turn off. I want to turn off satellite view. Because sometimes you can see the lot size, but Smart Maps does it. So I'm not going to spend too much time. Anyway, Google. There's a couple other ones out there that measure things. Find My Lot Size, I think, is one. There's a few paid places, but Google Earth is a free one. All right. So let's get rid of that. Then the next place that just gives you lot size. So if you go to Zillow, type in that same address. I don't need a question asked, but and you scroll down to the house details, the overview, fun facts and features. It'll almost always give you the lot size, which 7,490 square feet is probably the actual city designated lot size. So if they have easements and stuff like that, it's not going to account for that as well. And so if you're just using this number, if you remember from where we measured in Google Earth, the turf was 6,000. The full area we measured was 8,000. So it was somewhere in between the two distances. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the formulas and the calculations and the numbers we're going to look at and give you some ideas and thoughts that I had when I used this to build my services and to measure for stuff, because I did use lot size because then I could just look it up in Zillow, or I could just measure the lot. I used gross square footage, to be honest. Hey, it's Holly, right?
Yes, it is. Hi. Sorry, I joined a little late.
No, you're good. Thad's in here with me. We were just kind of going through some of this stuff. I told him if anybody jumps in real late or too far behind, I don't want to backtrack and make him have to listen to everything again.
Yeah, that's it.
But we're not far off, so I'll pull the thing up real quick.
Okay.
I was showing him Google Earth. You can measure properties free with Google Earth. So if you don't know about that, maybe we can follow back up later and I'll show you a couple things.
Okay.
It's really just measurements. It's Smart Maps is way better. I'm looking at Zillow right now, and then we'll move through how to do formulas and actually using the rate matrix. So we're just kind of getting started, but
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Zillow only gives you the lot size, is what I was saying in the overview. So if you can't price it based on lot size, then it's not as accurate as being able to measure properties. So that's why we want to focus on the Smart Map stuff. So that's Zillow. That's a couple of places for you to be able to collect data. Now we're going to go into Service Autopilot, where I have the same lead and the same address pulled up. And if you don't have this service, then you got to get it turned on. I can't do it anymore. When I worked there, I could, but now we can't. I don't have access to it. But if you come to any of the clients or leads, like this one here is just a lead, and I can tell that because of the way the screen looks. But if there's no job places to schedule jobs over here on the left, and it just shows estimates and they're not in their own little thing, and also have like an accounting section, then you know this is only a lead. Just kind of a tip there. But if you come to more on any client or lead, if you have smart maps, you come to more and you go to property measurements, it's going to pull up the measurement screen and area for measuring those properties. The reason this is, I think, good, and why I definitely want to focus on spending time talking about this is not because I want to make it shoot, I closed my, give me 1 second. I closed out my outline. I want to make sure I keep it open so I'm staying on topic or on time. I have like ideas of my time breakdowns. Sorry, doing a little housekeeping on the side. There's some information here there's just the ability to be able to do things with the data really quickly is paramount to be able to send estimates. And so just a little bit of background. Before I worked at Service Autopilot, I actually had a lawn care company for 15 years and used Service Autopilot for 7 of it. And by the end of it, I never went and looked at any properties. I would take measurements using smart maps and find the gross square footage. So we could start with that, but then you could take the house out, and I'll show you all this stuff, but I would take just the gross square footage because I figured out my pricing just based off of the full entire lot size. Because I figured it in and said, okay, well, there's probably going to be a house to trim around. There's a fence. Like, I don't need just the turf. If I take the gross, even if the house is bigger, we still have to trim around the house, or if the driveway is bigger and it takes up less turf, then we still have to edge the driveway. So it's taking about the same amount of time, whatever we come up with the numbers that work, we can talk about this later with your particular business, or we could schedule another call, to do like a consulting thing, and I could spend more time with it. This is kind of a group type overview, but the point here is I could measure the property. Somebody could call while I was on the phone with them, measure the property, and have an estimate ready in seconds, literally seconds. Because once you save that value, it'll pop up and it'll show the services if you load it with a template. And I could show you how to do all that stuff. So one thing that we definitely have to make sure we have available to us, and I clicked the little gear icon up here while I was holding down the control key or command key on my Mac, and it opens a new tab so we don't lose our lead. But one of the things we definitely need to have is the correct custom fields. So start typing custom and it'll filter your list. So if we go to custom fields and we start to look at things that are in here. Now, this is a test account, so you may have more stuff. If you've downloaded the launch bundle at all from Service Autopilot, then you'll have a bunch of LB : type custom fields, which just to kind of pat myself on the back, while I was working there, I made the launch bundle. And so I gave people things that I was using in my business: contract end and start date, driveway length, driveway square footage, gross square footage, house square footage, lot type, a lot of different things. Now in this test account, because I share it with some other people, that we've deactivated that one, but it's probably because most of them already had gate codes, home square footage. There were already numbers here. So by the time we built the launch bundle, we didn't need them in this test account anymore. Pool square footage, all the different stuff. You could put emojis and stuff in there. So if you want it to stand out, net square footage, flowers, trees, turf square footage, we can keep track of all of those different things. So you got to set up a bunch of custom fields that you want to be able to track data into. And if you need to build them later and come back to them, you can. It's just you can't add them to from this screen. So if you're going to save the measurement someplace, it needs to already exist and then come back and measure the screen. Because this isn't one of the places where you can add custom fields and create them from this tab or the screen. But if you had it open and then refreshed and came back, and if anything you added would then show up here. The emojis are really kind of cool because I'm going to be totally honest, I have no idea how this list is sorted. It's even with the display orders. I've tried to play with a lot of different things. Shrubs, CF. Let's see if that's 25. So it should be down near the bottom. I'm guessing. Yeah. Okay. So if there's certain numbers, then they're all numbered. Maybe the numbering works, but if you don't remember to number them, it's kind of random how these are just put in here. So maybe that's why we added some of the emojis, so it's easier to find the ones we were looking for. But that's also why We deactivated a bunch in this test account so that we didn't have a list of 100 to pull from. We tried to be specific, but I don't want you to limit your custom fields. You want to find a way to list manage it, maybe put zeros or numbers, figure out a way that works for you that shows in your list. All right. So one of the other really cool functions of this is you can toggle between full screen or not. This is kind of a small, little area. So if I click on that, it pulls up and makes my whole screen the property measuring tool. Then the thing I like to start with sometimes is looking at this map view, because it gives you, this is the lot. You see the squares? That is what is defined as the lot, I would guess, in the city. So we can check Zillow by saying we're on measure property up here. So if we start clicking, we could probably check Zillow's approximate measurement and say, and I probably should have kept the tab open, but it's 7,734 0.10 square feet based on that block that's showing. And so that's more than likely what Zillow's measuring. But if you look, and even if you hit the satellite view, there's grass on the other side of that. There might be some this way because the fence goes down. So that area that the Zillow's looking is probably just, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit because it'll be easier when we start clicking, but it's probably just that box that the city defines as your property, quote unquote property. And I'm using air quotes, but you can't see my face. And so that's one starting measurement that you could do and save. And I deleted it, but you just start clicking points along the way. And when you hit when you make the connection between the shape, it pulls that point. Now, if you take the middle and you needed a space, once you click on it and move it, it splits it in half. So if you needed to adjust the shape in any way, you could. If you need to get rid of it, you can click up here and click the X and it deletes it out. I'm going to switch to satellite view, and then you can see why the lot square footage. Let me go back. I'm going to put that box back on. Oops. No, I didn't want to do that. I hit the escape button because I was trying to get rid of that measurement. I was trying to click. Hold on. Let me get rid of that one. Okay. So I'm going to put the shape back for the lot size. It's not super accurate. But then if I switch to satellite view, you could see how it's missing, right? Like there's grass down here, there's grass down here. And watch what happens if I stretch that out just based on this view. It was 7,000 something, right? So if I drag this down and put it here, now we're at 8,744. Now, Holly, you weren't here, but that was pretty close to what we measured on the Google Earth number too. And again, the Service Autopilot uses Google's mapping API, so it's very similar technology and quality. The good thing though is then we can do stuff with the data. So, we could. You're off by, what was that? 1,000 square feet. That's a huge difference if you're charging by the square foot. So one of these measurements, this might be total lot size. And so when I have this number, I want to save this and say, let's save this to a custom field. So we come over here to this box and we select, we give it a name and we call it like gross lot size or something like that. And we want to save it as we want to save the gross lot size. So the 8,000, which it's got the number. Hold on a second. Let's go back to that one. Equals total square feet. Hold on. Let me select this one. Why is it not giving me my save? It's not giving me the custom field drop down. Hold on a second. Let me escape. I don't think it's it just was hidden. Okay. That was a fun little bug. I don't know if you guys noticed that when it was in the screen, when I minimized it, this box, I was clicking on it, but it was behind the window. Okay. Well, that's troublesome. Anyway, so the gross size, but you could see how the difference is, right? The smallness of it. But but let's say that's gross square footage. So do we have a box in here for that? I think we do. Let me find gross square footage. And we save that, right? So it says custom field saved. If we scroll down here to the details section and hit show details, it should be gross square footage, that number that we measured, 8,744.2. Now this one has a net square footage, a turf square footage, and a mulch cubic yards size to it already. Somebody probably used this client before and made some data, but we'll look at that. So let's go back. I'm going to go back to the full screen view. We'll have to see how that works with the custom fields. But if you notice over here in the measurement area, you have the one we created. You can add more, but there's also a couple of other buttons. You see how this one's kind of a light gray? Maybe we want that one to be a different color. And again, the pop-ups are happening. I'm clicking on them, but they're not showing underneath the screen. That's very, I wonder if it's because I'm using Firefox. I don't know. It's very annoying. So you could change the color. Like if you want that to be red, or maybe it's a green because it's grass, whatever. I don't know. You can do whatever you want. Let's say we'll make it a lighter green. You can change the opacity, I think that word is, and you can make it a really light color and say choose. So let's say we want to get a turf square footage measurement, but we could do that in two ways. But the way I'm going to show you, I think works the best, is you can also find the house square footage, or approximate square footage at the same time. So maybe we want to go, and I'm doing the house shape, not because it makes sense to cut out the roof, but let's just take this out and we'll say, we'll call it the house and the driveway, right? So let's take out, now watch what happens. That turns to a different color. We can change this to like a red with a little less opacity so it doesn't stick out too much. And we can call this house with driveway. The name here doesn't matter as much other than we're just saving it. But then right now this is adding to it, right? And so the total is 12,000. But if I click this little button, now it subtracts it. And now it has total square footage of 5,113. So it took out the 3,600 for the house. You could also just omit it entirely and then it doesn't do anything and it could just be a measurement in here. But what we wanted to do, we want to keep it as the minus, because now what I want to do is I want to save this house with driveway square footage as the house square footage or home square footage. So I'm going to save that measurement. But now I'm also going to save the total square footage, which is the total square footage right here. And I'm going to save that as net square footage, because that's technically the net of the grass, or maybe it's turf square footage. So you could save it as net or turf square. I'll save it as turf square footage. Actually, I'm going to save it as net because I know I already have a service set up for the price matrix. So we'll save that one as net square footage. Now, if they had a pool, we could take out the pool from a larger group measurement. You could add in as many layers and whatever you want. You could change any of these. You can change any of the pluses and minuses and omitting and changing colors. You could also do linear measurements. Now those aren't as stackable. So if I switch it, you can build linear measurements and put them in and then save those as custom fields. But if I do, let's switch to full screen mode because it's easier to measure. But let's go to linear measurements. And if you click the thing twice, it goes back. And it tells you right up here, it says, click on the map to create markers to measure their distance. Click and hold any marker, then drag to edit the measurement, and then right click on a marker on the map to remove it. So if I wanted to find, let's say for instance, there's sidewalk length. There's one right there. And then if you keep going, see how it keeps measuring it? It's not ideal, right? So if I right click and get rid of that. So the other issue here, like you could do this one at a time. It kind of goes back to the Google Maps sort of distance, but if you're measuring linear things, so instead of measuring areas that the other one does, this one might be good for just measuring sidewalks. So this might be sidewalk length. Now, it doesn't do it like the other one where you can add them and you can have multiples. So like you can't do total sidewalk length. You might just use this for like driveway length or like a fence or something similar, or maybe a roof line or roof number if you're doing Christmas lights. There's different ways to use this, but the linear measurements aren't as detailed. So I'm always a little bit not cautious, but I try to use it less than I would the area of the property measurements. Because you can't do as much with it. If you clear the whole thing, then maybe you could just add it and know that this is 25 feet plus what the other one is, and just start adding them up. Again, I wish you could make the measurement. You might even be better off just making, so let's add another one and we'll say, we'll go from here to here. But you just can't do, these are areas. So if I can't, it's not going to give you the length of anything. So you have to do an area with the area measurement one. That's the only reason why. So if you're doing lengths of stuff, you just have to do it and then kind of manually add the numbers in. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions so far? Am I going too fast? Am I covering this good?
You're doing great. Thank you.
Okay. One of the other cool features, you could flip and rotate the screens. This little button down here does like a top-down view no matter what, almost all the time. So maybe you're off and you could say that like, oh shoot, my gross lot size was off a tiny bit because of the way it was zoomed in. You know what I mean? Like you could fine tune it if you really needed to be that specific. I don't know that really moving it is that, you know what I mean? Like maybe that is 2 more feet, but versus this view, I'm not sure. But sometimes what else that does, if you notice, that's tree off, leave off a lot of times. And so if you have a neighborhood or you live in an area where there's tons of trees, like this one over here hadn't lost his trees when this picture was, but this tree does. And if you have it on, like sometimes it's the picture, and no one has any, Google has the control over when that updates. I was telling a buddy of mine, I was actually looking at the street view of my own house the other day. I was just playing around with something, and if I'm looking straight at the house and I move to the right, it's a totally different, the pictures were taken at a totally different time. Like the car came down and turned to the right and didn't go to the left at all. And so the cool thing about it is you can rotate the map, and sometimes it'll give you a different view based on that map. Like this one, I can't tell, I don't think it is, but you might have a tree off view on one of these 3, or you might see where the shape is different, like this house shape, but it's the angle again. So you kind of take this for what it's worth, right? Like the straight up view and the straight on view will give you a pretty good indicator within a couple, probably a couple 100 square feet on a 10,000 square foot lot. Now, the margin of error here isn't so dramatic, right? Like if you're off by a couple 100 feet, I would think we should be able to recoup that. Now, if you're doing stuff that's so specific or you're down to the square foot, then, this is only as trustworthy as the points can get from these pictures that we're at. But it's cool because you could move around, like maybe there is a tree. The other thing you absolutely can do is you can click the walkthrough button. Thad, I don't know. So if I click and drag and let's say I want to stop here, you can always look to see, and I don't know if this would have solved your problem where you said you had a hill, but you could click this. Now, obviously, if the person's calling, you're trying to give them a price on the phone, you may not be able to take all of this time. And this could be a 4-year-old picture. You don't have any way of being totally sure that the condition of the property is exactly the way it is when you look at these pictures, but it's going to give you a general idea. And so maybe you could see a hill from the street view that you didn't notice before from an overhead view or whatever. Does that make sense?
It was in the backyard.
Yeah. So in Texas, at least, and let me see if I can zoom out of that view. Let me go. Nope, that's not overview. Hold on. Let me see how to go back. Reset the view. Oh, hold on. Let me go back. So in Texas, at least, because we have alleyways, I think they come back here. So let me see if I can click and drag it. I don't know where
Wow, that's nice.
is that the same house?
I don't know, but I know that none of the houses I have in my area in North Carolina can you look at any other
Yeah.
backyards.
And that may be the case. Like I'm not saying this solves every problem, but I think a lot of times, I don't know if that's zoomed down here. I can't tell, but sometimes you can see like a lot of times I can tell. So if I put it back here, yeah, see how I can
Wow.
see the backyard and scroll over and now here's the backyard of that house.
Awesome.
But that's because, and you probably noticed it, we have alleys between all of our houses and all of our driveways on the back. So the Google car drove down the alley too and takes the picture. Now, like you said, that's not everywhere. That's probably not most places. Texas has alleys in every house. Like there's hardly any driveways on the front of the house, but everybody parks out there. It's kind of funny. But it does give you that alternative look, and maybe it's not that, or that might be where you use double with Google Earth, because I think Google Earth will give you topography too. Like they may have a topography section. I'm not totally sure on that. Maybe we can look. With that, I'm gonna mute you real quick, in case you were not trying to make noise. But you could play with the tools that you have and click some of these buttons and see if that helps solve any of the problems. Again, I don't know that it does if you can't see the backyard. Maybe it's not a hill. But as you do this more and you see things, it also might expose to you things that show you that a hill, like in Texas, we don't have hills. So I can't even show you an example. If you had an address, maybe Thad, in the next few minutes, pull it up and I'll search for it or something. Maybe we can look and use it as an example. But you can't, hey, give me 1 second. Someone's calling my RBS number. Hello? It's not. This is ready. Hey, sorry about that. Somebody was calling the RBS number. They thought it was Service Autopilot support because we have the same area code, and I think that it even starts with the same number. He was trying to call me on accident. Anyway, just utilize the tools. The key here and what I was trying to highlight was we can measurements that way. How we can save them, we can add and subtract them. So again, like I was saying, if they had a pool or if you just wanted the house and then the driveway area square footage was its own measurement, we could add all of those in and have them and save them. When I hit save now, even though I tried to add another one, when I hit save, if I leave full screen mode, if I exit this client or close out the map view, if I come back to property measurements, it tells me how many I have saved and it saves them there forever. So if I come back to this at any time, they're both here and they're there. Now you could calculate details and save the custom field without actually saving the measurement. But if you're going to do the work of measuring it, you might as well save it here too, give it a name and save it. And then you have it in both places. Because then if you ever need to, the property data right now stays with the client, but in V3, they said that they're going to be able to, you're going to be able to separate out the property data. And so that way, if the client moves, but somebody else moves in, you can attach the property data to a new client and it's still the same property data. Or maybe it's a property management company for a commercial property. Because this works the same way. Like if I pulled up for this, let's say this neighborhood here, just as an example, if you were going to do a bid on the snow plowing or whatever of this commercial property, you could come in here and measure the parking lot out, take out the garage or whatever this building is, because it's just this building. You could measure that. You could see this one has very little turf. You know what I mean? Like you could do this on any application. It doesn't have to just be a residential property that has, a small amount. You could do this for any size property and any type of property. Does that make sense? I would highly advocate for changing the colors like this one. Now that we're looking at it a little fuller screen, maybe it's just a little too opaque. I don't know. Choose it, save it, and you can see it. Maybe the green one, you know what I mean? You play with it and figure out how you want to utilize it best. The biggest thing here is trying to get the numbers and saving them, because that's where then now we'll start to make this like a useful tool and do stuff with it. Okay. Is that good enough covered for everybody? I'm going to move on to using and finding historical data. That's also helpful. Yeah. Thumbs up.
I'm good.
Okay. Holly, I asked Dad before before you got here but I'll ask you, do you guys, you're using Service Autopilot. So are you using any of this? Are you finding property data or finding any of this stuff already currently using any other methods?
I'm trying to sell my husband on this because he's still old school and goes out and meets with every customer, and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah, you spend so much time. Like that's why this is pricing for profit. You could do all this from the office when they call or when they fill out a web form and shoot them an email. You could still go meet them and do a property walk later, but be armed with this data and say, hey, before we got here, we measured your property and it's about 5,000 square feet of turf. We know the whole lot, you know what I mean? You could still do that and be armed with the data, and it's still just as useful, because then you could still price your services based on the data, and it takes that sort of, not the emotion, but sometimes the emotion out of it for pricing services. But then he might stop going there altogether, and then, go look at properties at all. And we'll talk a little bit about this at the end, because Thad ran into it a little bit, but you build it into your pricing, your quote, that, hey, we base this off of online measurement tools that we have available to us, that we reserve the right to adjust your rate if we come out there and, the circumstances just aren't what we expected. Like, this picture doesn't show that you have a house and there's 14 cars that have to be trimmed around, and everything else that goes along with what you show up to people's properties. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when we look at some estimate documents. But as far as data goes, do you guys at least track like data from your like the work times that you're spending doing your customers' jobs?
Yeah. Yep. We do that. Our team members have the app on their phone, and they'll start and stop when they're at the property.
Okay. Cause that's one of the biggest keys, right? Because that's where the valuable data actually comes from. You can measure these properties anytime later, but if you don't have any historical data of how long it takes you to do an actual property, let's do this. Would one of you let's create a new lead, and we'll look at somebody in one of your guys' property areas. I'm just going to call it a new lead. And then Holly, would you mind somebody that you have data for how long it's taken you, like somebody you've cut their grass more than 5 or 6 times, so you have some usable data that we can pull. Would you mind pulling up? Do you have a minute? Grab an address and I'll type it in, and we'll look at their property, because I'll show you how this works with the data you already have. Do you have that? Are you in front of your computer?
Yeah, I'm working on it right now. Hold on a second.
Cool. And Thad, this is where it'll be useful for you too. And we can look, and if you have data, we can look at one of your clients and stuff like that. I think we're pretty good on time, and I think we'll spend some time, but this is where this is where this has impact, is when you have data for clocked times already, because now we can apply the clock time, which I can't provide for you. Like, we can't just go measure how long it takes you to do it. You have to have that measurement. So that's the key tool, the key piece to all these formulas, is figuring those out. Excuse me. I'm gonna mute for a second. I gotta blow my nose. All right.
Okay, I have an address here whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
It's 4211 Clyde Park.
Flag Park.
Clyde, CL, like a Clydesdale. Clyde Park.
Park. And what's the zip code?
That's 49509.
495.
Yeah, it's an office building.
Are you in Grand Rapids or Wyoming?
It's actually, that one's Wyoming.
I saw that earlier. You guys I grew up in Howell.
Oh, yeah, over by Lansing.
Yeah. Let me see if Michigan is an option in this. It's not. We must have taken.
You could do Grand Rapids. Wyoming's basically like,
So the state won't, you can, that's the only one you can adjust, which one shows up in the list. Let me see if it saves is as Wyoming, Texas. I don't know. Your lead's been saved. It might not show the correct address. You can tell me if this is what it looks like. Clyde Park Avenue. Yeah. Does this look like the property?
yeah, yep.
Okay.
It's
So-
an office building.
Okay.
Yeah, with a courtyard. Yep.
It's this gray area. Does it go all the way to the back? Back here?
I think so. I'm not sure. John, is there a fence on the back of there? Sorry, my husband's here. We're working out of our house today, so you might hear my 3-year-old too. So
Oh, you're
it's
good.
a family affair.
So
Is that a
basically the
fence right
fence
there?
is here, you mow like this, see how I'm going?
Oh,
Here,
yeah. So this is a tricky one.
Courtyard,
Okay.
front,
So-
and then front.
Yeah.
There's a fence in the back, or the courtyards are in between the
The
middle?
fence in the back belongs to the neighbor, but it
Yeah.
separates the property.
There is a fence in the back, but it separates the property. So
Okay,
it's
so
on the
just-
property line.
Would you say it's like over here some?
I think
Along
it's
this
back a
line?
little bit. I think it's back a little bit
It's
further.
in the
Okay.
trees.
Yep. It's in the trees.
All right, well, so what I'm doing here is I'm entering like properties here. So I might say front section. And then we'll add another one. Cause if you want to break it out so that we're taking out just the turf, for instance. But here's the other thing is you might not want to break it out that way because you might just say, hey, not only do I have to because I have to trim and edge all of this, let me just account for this because I know that all of this is taking me this much time. Like the building, obviously we're not going to do anything with. So we'll take out around the building, for instance. And again, this is the stuff that you'll get better at as you use it more, but we're going to estimate pretty much that this area here is pretty close. Look at that. There's that polygon, weirdly shaped polygon. Now you said maybe there's a courtyard here. So if there is, maybe we go like this and we split it and we make this piece a little bit longer, and then we pull that around there, that kind of thing, like
Yeah.
if it's big enough, right? Like if that added 100 square feet and that made the difference, then who knows if that's worth the time of splitting all that. But if it was bigger or whatever, but the point here is now we say, okay, this is 15,175 square feet. So we'll take that total square footage. And again, it's so dumb that I have to do this on the smaller screen, but let's save that as net square footage, right? So we'll save that for this new client as net square footage, and we're just going to call this turf for this saved measurement so that when we come back here, it saves it, okay? And so when I get rid of this client, if I go back to showing the details and I come back here, I have net square footage of 15,175 square feet. So on average, let's just say, and I'll make a note somewhere on a piece of paper so I don't forget it, but how long does it take your crew to service this property if they're just trimming, edging, cutting, like just do like a regular lawn maintenance? Not if they're going to do any bush and bed work or trim bushes or anything, like they just go and mow and blow and leave. How long does it take them?
It takes them anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes when it's in the peak growing season.
But in the summer, sometimes 10 minutes because it's dry.
Yeah, and you can see from the aerial in the summer it dries out because they don't have irrigation, but
Well, they do, but they don't run it enough.
yeah, so it takes about 10 minutes in the summer.
So 10 to 20 minutes maybe at the peak. So if we said 15, we'll split the difference just to estimate it and say, okay, on average. But the other thing, the beauty of it, if you have all this historical data, you don't have to find just the average that we want to pick. You can look at all of your details and say, okay, we made 36 visits. The average of those 36 visits was this amount, right? That's the number you need to know. Okay.
Does it calculate it for you though? Because
No.
that's
No.
the problem. You got to
But
go
you have
back
to
and
know it. You have to know those details. Now you can
Yeah.
find them using reports in the report center, the job cost report. You can find that detail. So let me look and see what's in here. Again, I have test data, so that's the hard part. But Thad, you're in the same boat. If you have job details, so if you have records of how long these jobs are taking people, let me see job costing. Let me see what job Scott has for job costing, regional training from April. Let me see if this is pulling good data. But there's reports. You could build a custom analysis. Yeah, so see bed maintenance, this is grouped by service name, but you could group it by client name and say, okay, and then by service name, and then you could see their actual time variance or their actual times, their labor times for how long they were at those services. And then you instead of sum, you could do an aggregate and say average. Now, if there's a zero in there at all, or if they just clocked in and clocked out and stopped the job and it didn't account for the whole 10 minutes, then your numbers are going to be way skewed and you might have to export it and delete out the ones because it doesn't do a good job of filtering out like zeros of the actual hours. Like all of these here where there's zeros, those are useless. They won't add to any of the averages. And so they're not good data. But if you have clocked time and good data for the actual hours that they spent doing the work, you can use the report center. Now, again, you could still use it and export it and then clean up the data in Excel or Google Sheets or whatever to get a better average. But let's say you had 36 VITMO visits in a year for that location and you averaged 15 minutes, right? So based on our data, it's 15,175 square feet. So you would take that math and you would say 15,175 square feet divided by 15 minutes, right? Because it takes you 15 minutes. This is it. You're doing 1,111 square feet a minute. And if that's how you want to price this type of service, now, if you need a residential one, because there's more house trimming and but you figure out how much square feet you're doing at what rate. So you use those numbers the numbers you already have because you have the job times, and then you go in and measure people's properties and say, okay, if let's say it is a residential application, and you measure 20 of your customers and say, okay, we're doing about 1,000 square feet a minute on commercial properties, but we're only doing about 700 square feet a minute on residential properties, whatever the numbers end up becoming, right? You use those numbers to then build a formula that says, okay, here's what we need to charge. Okay, so just for an instance, and I'm not asking because I want to, what do you charge these people to cut their grass for just for the mowing part? Like if it's a whole contract thing or whatever, about what does it break down to per visit for mowing, do you think?
15 minutes, so our minimum.
Our minimum is 48
So
and usually it's about like a quarter of an acre. 15 is equivalent to about 15 minutes is what we found.
okay.
Trying to get 50, right?
So it's about $48, and then if they have irrigation, it's 50.
Okay, so if you charge them $48 for that 15 minutes of work at 1,000 square feet a minute, so we're gonna do 1,011 divided by 48. So you're charging them about $21 no, why is my math all weird? No, I gotta do 48 divided by 1100 is about what it was. So it's about 4 cents a square foot, right?
Yep.
I say right, like, you know. the answer to that,
Sure,
but
I agree.
I'm looking at the calculator. And so if you take the math and you say, okay, we charge them $48 and we're doing 1,000 square feet a minute, or even if you did the $48 divided by 15,175, that's 0.003. So that's like less than a cent. So you probably aren't going to price your square feet by the one individual square foot. You might, when we get to the rate matrix, we might put in a number that's every 500 square feet, it goes up this amount, or every 100 square feet. So figuring out those formulas is what ends up becoming the key. And just so I'm staying on track. Yeah.
Real quick, just kind of going back to the report, was that a canned report or was that something that was created?
So this one's a custom analysis. This one would have been, but I would guess any amount of details that Scott, if I look at the data, he just had a lot of the job cost details one, which mimics very, very closely the job cost, and I can type in job in the CAN reports. So if you look at the job cost summary or the job cost report, I think it's the summary that'll allow you even to filter by clients. So that might, yeah, you can filter by customers. But that'll give you those times. So I don't know when we have usable data in here. Let me see if there's anything from, hold on a second. Let me check November 1st through today. Okay, yeah. So you can see actual revenue time, actual revenue per man hour, budgeted man hours, actual time variance, target over under labor costs. So you can't see their actual times. So it's going to give you your budgeted dollars per man hour and the revenue totals. This is a little bit more of a numbers thing. It's not the job. It's not the number you need. You need the actual time spent doing it. So you could look at the job cost report. You just can't filter this one by client. You have to pull a lot of that's why it's nice to use the custom analysis, because then you can do more with it and you could just pull this same data. So you could build a report and you see where's actual start and stop time. So your actual hours, this one here is useful because you could export it to Excel and do that. But if you had that custom analysis, you could get rid of all those other fields and just look at actual hours and then group it by client and then group it by service, or filter out for just one service. And then that's all you see is the clock time, the actual time spent, and then you can find an average way easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay. And Thad, did you pick up on that too?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Because that's where the data, that's where, again, and I don't mean to keep harping on this, but that's where the important parts come from. I can measure your properties at any point, right? Like you can pick this data up later. You could, like Holly's husband, you didn't tell me his name, but he's going out and measuring them or looking at them. And even if you don't know that you're using a number in your head to price the services, you're calculating it somehow. And you're using how long you think it's going to take you. But if you're armed with actual data and you can figure out a formula and you can start to say, okay, we're doing 1,000 square feet a minute. So let's price our services that way and say, okay, instead of it being a sort of willy-nilly, I don't know how to price my services, or everybody gets a different price based on how I feel that day. You could be doing this from here at the office, or you could have a virtual assistant doing it. You could have anybody doing this, and it's based off of numbers. So if we go by this square footage, then when we build the rate matrix in a minute, it'll pop out the price for this customer, and I don't even have to think about it. All I have to do is add it to an estimate, and it shows me the price. Does that make sense? Jamie, I don't know. Can you say hi? I don't know where you're from. I don't recognize the name. I'm sorry. Do you want to unmute and say hello? Oh, Jamie left. Didn't want to say hello. Put them on the spot to say hi, and they they dipped right out. Okie dokie. I just didn't see a Jamie on my list of people I invited, but any of the companies could have sent it to somebody. So I don't know. I don't think people just randomly show up on a Zoom meeting, but maybe. I don't know. We had a visitor that I don't know who it is. Okay. All right. So I'm going to drag my thing back over and show you. We're getting to the rate matrix part. So finding your data that's usable. So you need to be able to locate that in Service Autopilot somehow, whether it's a report center, whether it's just historical data that you have collected. If you don't have it in Service Autopilot, you had it written down on a piece of paper. I don't care where you get it from. You need to know how long you spent doing whatever service you want to price with a rate matrix. You have to have a data point for how long it took you to do it. Otherwise, it's like maybe it's bushes. You could build rate matrices to do like bushes, and then you have a number count. That's still a usable field. But the power of these services is if you have a custom field that measures a net or total square footage, and you use that armed with the data of how long it took you to do the job. Now, one thing I will add, and I told you I would interject where I could. I didn't measure out and take out the size of the building when I calculated my fields. And the reason I didn't personally was I figured that this area is figuring out the area of the surface area. But all of this needed to be trimmed and edged all around the buildings a lot of times. Now, obviously not every single space is, but the sidewalks all need to be edged. All of this has to be trimmed, maybe flat topped around a mailbox post or whatever it is. And so when I looked at my numbers, I said, well, here's what I figure. If I look at a residential property, for instance, and I say, okay, if I took out the turf and I price this by the 100 square feet, and I just looked at the turf, it's not, in my mind, it's not accounting for the amount of time I spend trimming around the house and everything else. And if the house is bigger, then there's more trimming. Or if there is a pool and there's a pool deck and I have to edge around that, I don't take out for the pool because that area that's covered there, maybe it's 1,000 square feet and I charge by the 100 square foot. So that's 10 multiples of whatever I was going up that still gets added or accounted for that because I have to edge around the sidewalk. And so it made it easier for me just to click the polygon and charge a bigger number and say, okay, on average, maybe there's a couple I might lose a dollar here or there on, but there's the other ones that I make a dollar here or there on are going to make up the difference for that particular service. Or I readjust it later after I had in my service agreement that we would reevaluate the price after 6 visits, because then I could get a general understanding of how long we were going to spend doing the work. Plus, Service Autopilot gives you the previous 6 and the next, upcoming 6 visits really quickly if you just click on the job. So I had a reminder that popped up after 6 weeks of starting service with somebody that said, double check the budgeted hours versus the actual hours and make sure we're priced right. Because then we would readjust it. Maybe we had to go up $2. If we were too high already, we generally didn't go down. But if we weren't making enough money, we would raise the price and talk to them and say, hey, before we come out the next visit, we got to jump your price up. We were off by like $2. It's the trampoline in the back or whatever, that we didn't see in the picture. You build that into your agreement so that you don't get stuck. Maybe it's not 6, maybe you only do 4, whatever your numbers want to be, but you can build that out. So let me zoom this back over. We have data square footage. Now, what do we do with it? We use that to build numbers, and I'll look at that. I should have built a chart, but I didn't. What happens if we don't have data? If you don't, both of you are both here, you have data. If you don't, then start collecting it, because you got to know how long it takes you to do these properties. Even if it's not data that you have, maybe it's in your brain because you've been doing it for so long. That's fine data too. You just need to be able to quantify and say, okay, it's way more accurate if you have actual clock data so that you're not just assuming you know what it is. But even if that's all you have, you could still use it to price it. And then what are the services we can price this way? That's kind of up to you to decide, but ones that are easy to price this way are anything that you could price based on how long it takes, as well as what data you have. So if it's square footage, maybe it's bush count. You can come in here and go 1, 2, 3. You can count the number of bushes. If you do parking lot striping, maybe it's the number of lines in the parking lot. The different things and ways you can price the services that you're doing are a little bit different. Now, if you're doing bush trimming, it may be hard to price by the bush because you're doing, you won't be able to see all of the stuff. Maybe rotating it will give us a different view, and there's 6 more bushes we didn't account for. So there is some detail to that. I didn't mention it before, but go to client location. No, there was, maybe it's in V3. You could put pins on some of the maps. Yeah, maybe it is V3. But you could count the bushes a little bit easier by rotating around. Like, obviously this tree view is not going to be helpful. Straight over is probably not going to be helpful at all for looking at bushes. But if you wanted to price service per unit type services that way, there's a potential for it. But the bulk of this here is mowing type services, things that you can quantify numbers and pricing for. Anything that you can do, that you can price. Now, it doesn't mean you have to do the work. You could still generate a flat rate for your service. It doesn't have to be an hourly service. It just has to be a service that you can quantify how long it takes you to complete based on some data point. So let's say if you were a house cleaning company and you wanted to measure the square footage of the house, and that's what determined how you price your service. Okay, if you have a 2,500 square foot house, it's this much. If you have a 1,500 square foot house, it's this much. Does that make sense? Any number you can use that's measurable, you can price a service with a rate matrix. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thad, you too? Does anybody have questions?
Yes.
So far? Yes. Okay, cool. Does anybody have questions so far about what we have, or have a particular instance or something they want to look at based on what we've already covered on their own? Thad,
I don't think so. I don't think so. No,
Okay.
I have some instances, but there's stuff that I think you can't avoid, like new construction houses. Like I've got one now that I'm looking at that's almost completely dirt, and I have no idea if they built a house between the house I'm pricing and the house next to it.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah,
little
there's-
stuff like that. And then
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
And then as far as your square foot matrix, or what you were talking about as far as a way to plan and price, like right now, whenever I price a yard, I do it by the per 1,000 square feet, and that price is nowhere close to 4 cents of 500 or whatever you were saying, because if you've got more than one guy on a crew, then that doesn't compensate for all the lost time sitting and driving and all that stuff.
Yeah. Now it won't, that won't necessarily, when we look at the rate matrix, you can add costs in that'll help you budget for that. But that's all stuff you have to factor in too. You have to be able to add in your costs. And I'll show you when we get to the rate makers how we can add to that. So it'll give you some general ideas of how to price those, how to help price your services for sure.
Okay.
And if we want to double back later, or if we need to look at anything else, we can for sure like look at a specific example. I mean, we're right at 30 minutes left. Even though we got started late, I still want to end on time, and just to make sure that I'm not jeopardizing all of you guys' day. But so we'll just dive in. We'll look at setting up a rate matrix using custom fields, adding matrices, items one at a time, or figuring out if you can do it incrementally. And then we'll talk a little bit about adjusting your terms. So one of the services that I know is in this system already for services, and if we have to find a different rate matrix, we can, but one in here that we had, I'm just going to change this page size to 500, was our lawn maintenance service fit. So this is set up as a flat rate service, weekly maintenance. There's no budgeted hours or rate or default hours set in here because we set it with the rate matrix. But the first thing to look at is there's 2 ways to calculate it. You can either calculate it using your calculation field, so whatever your custom field data is, times the quantity times the rate times the number of visits for the year to give you a price, which I highly don't recommend, because then it's pricing it based on whatever number that is. So if you type in 15,000, then it's going to price it per 1 square foot. If you divided that by 1,000, and put in 15, then it would still price it by the 1,000 square feet. So it would multiply by 15, but it's going to multiply your rate by 15 every single time. And it's probably for some instances, it's worth doing it. And you might want to read through some of this, but the quantity times rate times visits is a way better to price it, because then it gives you the quantity. We're trying to find the rate and then the number of visits. If you price your services or give people pricing based on a one-time visit price, this is what it's going to charge you, and we charge every single week. Then you can just put the visits as one, and then it's $48 for us to cut your grass each time we're there. If you go 36 visits and you're giving them a yearly price, then you could just put in 36 visits, and each time we cut your grass, it's $48. The system does the math for you, and you don't have to mess with any of that if you're doing it quantity times rate times visits. If you add in the calc field, then it just throws in another variable that multiplies things, and then you end up with really wacky numbers. So my recommendation is using the calc field to determine your rate, and we use the matrix to determine that rate, that then spits out, and then we can multiply it by quantity or visits to get the actual numbers later, if that makes any sense. So when we look at the next field, you pick the custom field it's based on. So this one is based on the net square footage, which is why for the leads and every place else, I've saved it as net square footage. Then this is where your data comes from. And you say, okay, if you have a minimum, which Holly, you said you did. So whatever your minimum size is. So if it's from 0 to 5,000 or whatever a quarter acre is, what is that? How many square feet is a quarter acre? I don't know.
Don't ask me, I failed math, which is why I'm here.
Siri, how many square feet is a quarter acre?
You don't need math when you have a calculator in your pocket.
Exactly, Siri, 10,890. So I'm not going to change the number on here because Scott might try to use this later or somewhere else. So let me find another service and we'll just add it to it. Let me see if maintenance has a rate matrix. I just don't want to break anything. Okay, it doesn't have anything. So let's just mess with this one. We'll just call it straight maintenance. We're going to base it on the net square footage. And we're going to say, we'll use your exact example to see if we come up with the right number, right? So if anything from 10,890 square feet, the rate is $48. And your budgeted time is, if it takes them, we're averaging, we're using it as an average. So it took them an average of 15 minutes, right? So that's 0.25. But yes. How many guys did you have there for 15 minutes?
Average would be 2.
So 2. So we're going to put in a budgeted hours of 0.5. So it's taking them a half of a man hour, right? If there's 2 guys there for 15 minutes, a quarter of an hour times 2 is a half an hour. So it's half of a budgeted hour, 1 man hour is what this is calculating. And about what do you pay 2 guys an hour? Like, what do you pay them about the same? Are they like, what, how much do you pay them?
Well, it's usually our leader, and he's about $21 now. And
okay, so 21.
And then the other one's 16.
16. Okay. And then here's a simple math. You can multiply it by 1.11 because that'll give you your burden, your taxes and workman's comp and stuff like that. It won't be exact, but it's a pretty close number. So that's $41.07 is what you pay them an hour, right? About. This isn't this is just labor. This isn't factoring in your overhead and all the other stuff. This is just labor is all we're looking at. So if I divide that by 2, this is going to cost you, it costs you about, $20.53. So now the other thing we have to look at is we can either add another item that says, I'm going to build this range out. So if my rate, it changes by a random amount based on different numbers, then you can add another item and it'll say, okay, from 10,891 to 11,891, which is 1,000 square feet, right? The rate changes by this amount and the budget, it takes us this much longer and it takes us this much extra money. Or you can just say if it's incremental. So for every 1,000 square feet over 10,890, how much would your rate go up? So if you did another 1,000 square feet, how much is it going to go up? Which, if we used your math to do, you did 48 divided by 15. What was the number? I'll just use this as an example for this size. It's probably way too much, but 175. So that's 3 cents. So we're going to do times 1,000. So it's $3.16. So we're going to go up $3.16. And how much longer do you think it would take you to do an extra 1,000 square feet? Well, we did the math, right? You're doing about 1,100 square feet a minute. So if we did another 1,000 square feet, it's going to go up by 1 minute, which 1 divided by 60 is 0.01, which I don't know if it'll go that low, but let's see if it does. And the extra cost is 0.01 times, that was about 41 bucks. So 41 cents. We'll just use this as a number and we'll see if we're anywhere close, okay? So let's hit save. And we'll save this maintenance service. Now, if I go back to this lead and I add an estimate, and I add that item to the estimate, so we're looking at maintenance right here. Now, as soon as I put this in here, it's going to give me a rate, which is 60. Hold on a second. Let me make sure I didn't break something. Yeah, because it's 10,890. So if we come here and look, this maintenance service is using the calc field of 15,175.90 square feet because that's what we measured for the lead, right? The rate matrix is telling us that you should be charging them $63.80 and that it's going to cost you $22.58 and it's going to take you a little bit over a half an hour a little bit over a half an hour with one, if you just sent one person, which I know one person doesn't work as fast as two, the budgeted hours is 0.5. So if 2 guys are there, it's halved. Does that make sense? And so you could see that number. Now, if you need that number to be 48, then that's the numbers we need to put back in the rate matrix because the price for $48 isn't at 10,890. That's not where the break is happening. It's starting at probably closer to 15,000 square feet. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
But that's where you play with that and you see, okay, well, that one's 68. Maybe you have another maintenance service that's a premium service because you do work with the beds and your minimum rate for that same square footage is $48. Let me add that maintenance service that Scott had already built. So we'll do maintenance. He had, service fit. So if I apply that, based on that rate matrix, which I'll pull it up here. If you look at this one, service fits rate matrix. Oh, Service Autopilot's going really fast today. This one is from 0 to 5,000. The rate is 35. So his minimum's $35, which we live in Texas. So that's what I would never start a lawn care business in Texas because it's so cheap. But it's a minimum of $35. The budget hours is 0.17 for 5,000 square feet. So you're here less than a quarter of an hour. 0.17. What's that times 60? I'll do the math for us all because I'll know. Times 60. That's 10 minutes. The cost is $6.08. From 5,000 to 8,000, it jumps up to $40. And the budgeted time is 0.33. So that's what, 20 minutes? 20 minutes, and it costs $13.02. Then every 3,000 square feet over 8,000 is $5 more. So even with this one, he could have done the 3,000 over 5,000 and got up $0.5, but he probably did it to show you two numbers. But you don't even need that second range. You could just go from 0. So this one goes up by $5 increments every 3,000 square feet. So if you do 3,000 divided by 5, that's 600 square feet, $1 every 600 square feet. So you could price this even closer if you just went up instead of 3,000 over 800, you could go up every 600 square feet is $1 more. But you can get as finite as you wanted. If you wanted this to go up every 1 square foot over 8,000, it's 0.03 cents. Now the numbers that you add here can only be so small. But if you could price it per square foot or 100 square feet, that could end up being way better, because then you could, let me show you what that does. So for instance, let's go back to the maintenance service, because we're pricing it by 1,000, right? To go up a couple bucks. Let me see if this thing loads. Rate matrix. So we're doing 1,000 is $3 more. So 3.16 divided by 1,000 equals 0.03 cents. So let's say I want to do this every 100 square feet. So that's times 100. So that's 31 cents. Now the time's going to be harder to go up by 100 because we're going to add another 0. I don't know if it'll go in there. And then we'll just add another 0 here, and we'll save this. We'll see if it goes up by a 0.001. I don't think it will. So it may not give us good budgeted hours, which is just as useful, but if we can't save it, then I can't, we might have to pick a different number or find a way to price it. Like our numbers are probably crazy. But if I delete this out and re-add the service, so that's the other thing. You definitely have to, you can't just come in and refresh it. You have, because we made the change, you have to re-add the service. Now, if I apply it, now it's only $61.33. If you remember before, wasn't it higher? It was 60 something.
Yeah, I think it was like 63 or 8 or something.
Yeah. But that was because it was jumping to the next price at 1,000 square feet instead of, and it did. See how the budgeted hours is 0.543 now? But instead of that, now it's pricing it every 100 square feet. So your pricing is way more accurate because you're pricing it every 100 square feet. So this one's 15,175. If I change this to 15,200, watch what happens. It changes the price to $61.64. If I change this to 15,600, it makes it $62.88. Because we're changing our service by the percentage or the amount. Whereas with Scott's, it's going up every 800 or whatever. If you did it by the dollar, then when you change this to 15,600, I don't know if that's a big enough jump. No, it's not. So we need, let's say 16,000.
I think it was 3,000, every 3,000 over 8,000.
Oh yeah, you're right. So I need to change this to like 18,500 or something. But then it jumps to $60. But if you could get it to where you're moving the increment by $1, you're probably, and because you want to keep even numbers, then you figure out your price to where how many square feet am I doing for $1? Then you just figure out that math. I mean, I know you said you failed math or weren't good at math, but that's what it boils down to is math. So if you could figure it out to how many square feet you're mowing for $1, then you could price it to go up incrementally every dollar. Is this making any sense?
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah. I think where I need the most help, honestly, is like, you know, when we're putting in pricing for mulch and stuff like that, we're primarily landscape, about 80% landscape.
So mulch is the same way. So I don't know if we have mulch, but mulch is, do you price your mulch by the square foot or do you do it by the bag? How do you price your mulch?
Square foot.
Okay, mulch is probably, it might be even easier then. Let me see if we have a mulch installation flat rate. Yeah. So let's see if there, yeah, so from 0 to 1. So mulch cubic yards. Do you do it by the cubic yard?
John does all this, so I have no idea. I'm just the technical person.
Sure.
He's the real brains.
We'll still use that as a number though. So if you price it by the cubic yard, so if he's figuring that out, he's probably ordering it by the cubic yard. So if you price your mulch by the cubic yard, you could say, okay, from 0 to 1, it's $85 and the cost is 30. For every 1 cubic yard over $1, it's 85 more, which this is just using, it's the same as using the flat rate, which is the quantity times the rate. So it's not as helpful in this particular instance. But if, let's say you had a minimum of $200, then you could charge that. And then every cubic yard after that was more or something. But honestly, mulch becomes, it's sort of its own, you put mulch in here and you figure that by the cubic yard and you apply it. And so if that field was saved and you had, 6 cubic yards, then it's $510 because it's $65 or $85 a cubic yard to install it. And it cost us $180 to do $510 worth of work. And it's going to take us about 6 man hours.
So it's going to subtract the cost out. So you have your, I guess, oh, there it is, the total cost. Okay. Yep.
Now, it won't show you that until you quote your service. So if I quote that mulch service, which I don't want to quote all these, I clicked on it, but I don't. If you quote your mulch service, then down here, it'll tell you, here's your revenue, 510. The cost is 180 because it's factoring in the service. That's the labor part, is the $180, which this case might not include the labor. That might be $180 just for the mulch, the materials, which the costing doesn't really do as good of a job unless you add a bunch of individual costs that you had built up. So you could build that into it. But if you build the cost of the mulch itself plus the labor into here, which generally in Service Autopilot, our services are handling the labor portion, you might add in a product. So you might add in mulch. Let me see if he's got mulch, pine bark. Let's just add that and see if he's got a number. Yeah, so the mulch costs $28. So more than likely, this is the labor part of that service. So now my costs are $208 because the mulch is costing me $28, which is still cheap because the quantity is not 6. That's why.
Okay, this is helpful because I was trying to figure out, do you separate it all out or is it all lumped in together?
That's the thing. It depends what service you're pricing. Now, if you're doing maintenance, like lawn mowing or anything like that, you might not include other items, but you could include your mower. Like you could build out way more stuff to this, but with mulch, you probably have the service that you price, and then you also include the product. Now, if you don't want to show the product on the invoice and everything else, and you just want it all lumped into the main price, this is what's going to show on the estimate. If you don't print this product on the estimate or show it on the invoice. Now, I'll say this, if you schedule the estimate or the work from the estimate, this $336 doesn't add to the price of mulch on the invoice unless you have this invoiced. Then it shows on the list. So if you do it and do the work, you have to add the $336 back in. Don't ask me why. It's the stupidest thing. I yelled at the devs from when I used Service Autopilot, and then when I worked there, they got sick of hearing me saying it, and everybody talks to them about it because it doesn't translate over. But this will tell you, all right, so for this $846 job, because all I have quoted is the mulch, it's going to cost us $348, $180 in service, so the labor, and $168 in materials. So our estimated gross profit is $498, which is 60%. Our overhead costs, which is built into probably some number that Scott has built out somewhere that adds overhead to it. probably, I don't know where we use this for different things, but somewhere you can build in a 4% overhead costs he's got in here. So it's showing we're getting a net profit of 54.9%. Based on that number, we would have total budgeted hours of about 2 hours, which I don't think is calculating appropriately, because it's not going to take if you're doing 6 hours of labor, the 6 hours of mulch, I don't think is where that number needs to come in. He might have a matrix on the mulch too. Again, it's a test account, so I don't know, but you wouldn't typically have a budgeted hours here if the labor's handling that. This would be 0. So this number is a little bit off. But if this was 0, then or if this was the way it is, then you're saying, okay, it's going to take us 12 man hours. We're going to make $70.50 a man hour revenue. Our net profit's only $38.70. That might not be enough. So we got to jack up one of these prices. And we change it. You can adjust the rate either here, or you could just change this number on the rate and say, okay, we need to charge more.
Did I hear you correctly when you said that you have to show, for example, in the mulch, you have to show the materials on the invoice in order for it to calculate correctly?
Yeah, yes. Well, yes, automatically if you schedule it from if you schedule it or add it to the job. If you the only way it'll add the price to it is if it's showing the product on the invoice.
Got it. Okay.
Otherwise, if you schedule it and complete the work, and here, let me just do this because this is.
Can I interject on that for a minute?
Yeah.
That is an ongoing problem for me. I have both of those lit up, the print and the invoice. And every single time I bill out a landscape job, I have to go in to the estimate to see what the actual total product or the total cost of the job was, because those products do not translate to the end total.
Even with the show on invoice?
Even with invoice click, I have to go back into my estimate every single time I do a landscape job just to get the actual price, because I do 2 payments over $1,000, and I have to go in literally once I take the first payment out. I have to then go back into the estimate to see what the total was, to see what the remainder is. It's the estimate. If you put those products in, like I do it with plants too, I put all the plants in as a product. You do not get that in. That does not transpire into the invoice.
Are you scheduling the work from the estimate too?
Yes, scheduling the work from the estimate as well. Yes, the products they show up on my job form. Like I have my job, whenever I pull my job for my crews, the plants are on the job. But every time once I complete the job, I never have those products on my invoice, and my invoice ends up being a couple hundred to 1,000 less than what it's supposed to be.
Because of the materials. Okay. Yeah, and that's another, the estimate part becomes hard. I'm going to test that here and just see, because it's not that I don't believe you. I've seen it work, but it doesn't mean it always works that way, Thad. So let me see if it works this way when we're doing it now. So I won that mulch estimate. If I schedule the job as I got to convert them to a client. So let me schedule this as a one-time job, and then I'll complete it for today. Because you see how the products here, that's making me think that might not be checked right. I know you said it is, Dad, but because see how it's showing here with the total?
Yeah.
So it might be that this invoice box isn't checked when you do that, because if it's not checked, then it absolutely will not add to it. Like if I don't invoice this, it's going to show here, but it won't show the total. But let me finish it all the way through, because maybe it won't when I save it. So let me collect the resource, and I'll just say this was maintenance crew 1. Let me save it. I'm going to mark it as complete now, and I'll go look and see from this client if there's an estimate, because I want it to be correct, but I also want to look at now again, if it's a service autopilot thing, I can't fix that, and I don't even have any way. Where'd the job? Oh, it was still a one-time job. Scheduling. Why is there no transaction?
Because you marked it as complete. Whenever it's a one-time job and it's marked as complete, it doesn't show up in the, it doesn't show up anymore.
Oh, and then, yeah, sorry. And the invoice settings aren't set here to be complete. But if you look here now, so if I come here and let me complete this invoice. But yeah, you're right. I forgot I clicked it as complete when I first did it. So I completed that invoice. So if I go back to the client now, it should show here. And it has the mulch and the installation. So it's showing the total. But again, Holly, what I mentioned before, if you don't want to show what the price of that mulch is, and you have it unchecked, then it's only going to show the total of 510. It's not going to show the total that the estimate said, which was $846, because it doesn't account for it. And then you have to do like Thad said, where you have to add in the price of the materials to the service price to get the total. It's literally the dumbest thing ever. And I don't know why they never fixed it. Even if this shows on the estimate, because right now the estimate won't show, the estimate will show that the price of the mulch installation is $846 and it won't show the material line item, but the invoice doesn't honor that setting, that number, unless you have this invoice, but show on product on invoice selected. And it's so annoying. And even like Thad said, he's run into it where it's not show, it still doesn't show after they complete it. Now, Thad, one of the other things to think about, and again, I'm not saying you guys, it might be that inside this box, if you had it set to, which there's one box where you have to check, it's on the invoice, you have to set it up that way. But maybe if it's set to confirm the usage and you guys didn't confirm it, then it won't add it. So maybe there's an option there that's not getting set. If you look back here, sorry, one on this thing, I keep clicking, but it's not, it's going so slow that it's not. Service Autopilot's going so slow. Let me click on this again. So on this setting here, where you have options, if it's set to confirm and you don't confirm it on the dispatch board, or that they used it, then it won't add it because it's not confirmed. It won't let you complete the job and close out the day appropriately if it's set that way, and it'll turn pink on the dispatch board. So I think you would notice that.
Well, let me ask you this. That may be the truth, because my guys are horrible about using the phone.
Yeah.
So when there's no way to confirm those products being used on the computer, is it? Because most of the time I'm having to confirm the jobs as complete in the afternoon, because they just they blame it on language, not being able to speak English, but that's not the case. They just don't want to learn the phone. But can I confirm those products from the computer?
Yeah, so if you have that set on the estimate to confirm, when you have this set, if you have that set here, when you schedule the job and you come to the dispatch board, this line item would be pink, would be red. So if you go to legend and then I show the legend, if you go to colors, it would be red because it would say must confirm product. So this line would be red before you could close it out. Now, it's not going to be red because I didn't change it and it's already invoiced, but you would click on this button here with the products thing, and then it would, instead of it being yellow like it is, it would say confirm, and you would say, yeah, remove from invoice, used but do not invoice, and not used. So it would say confirm here, and you could click on it and you could say, okay, I know that they used it. Let me use it and add it to the invoice. Now, if you say use but don't invoice, need to confirm. Here you go. Here it's back on now. So yes, it's confirmed. You want to add it to the invoice when you click on that box now, which my thing's not closing, but yes, use but don't invoice. So it would take out, it's already invoiced, so I can't change it, but it would take out that $336 and you would have to add it back in manually if you don't want to show it on the invoice. It's literally the dumbest thing. Like I don't understand why anyone, you see how right now the rates down to 510?
Yes.
It's so ridiculous. Because that's what it would show the amount was going to be for this job. Because it wouldn't add the price of the product.
Mm-hmm.
And even in this box, that's what it shows you is the amount. Now, if you go to total, it'll tell you what the total amount is. You have to add that column though, is the total column, because then it's adding in the products. And that might be one column you could just add, Thad, to make sure. If you see anything in yellow, that means you have products attached to the job. So that might be helpful too, to look and say, okay, anything that has a product, we need to double check. But add the total and the amount columns together, and you're like, okay, if the amount and the total don't match, or if it, then there may be something else. There's products that are getting added, so it should be the same. If you have products and the amount and the total are the same, then it's probably not set right.
Okay.
But that part's, I'm not lying, that part's definitely jacked up. And any of your services, if you add products to them and you don't add the invoice, you have to add in the total of the product cost, the product numbers to your rate for the service, or it won't account for it in any fashion at all, unless it's listed on the invoice. And not everybody wants to show, like most people want to show an invoice that looks you probably don't want to send an invoice that looks like this with the pine bark and the price. Cause then you're like, what? He gets the bark, the mulch for, in this case, it's $56 a piece. But if you had it in there for what you paid for it, if you got it wholesale for like $15, you have to have this show what it would cost the customer, basically.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's one of the limitations of the system. Now the last thing I wanted to cover was making sure that you had those numbers and everything else, but then looking at your estimate descriptions. And I don't know, because we're about 5 minutes over. So I definitely want to honor you guys this time. And I don't want to just keep going, but let me see if there's a Jack's estimate document. Let me see what this one is. Look at my scratch off. Let me see if this is in here. Review quote. Where's it at? Uh-oh. I was gonna say it's got a pop up. Okay. I don't know if Scott has this in here, but now it's gonna open 12 of them because I clicked on it a bunch. No, it doesn't. I don't have another. I used to have it in a different test account where I had the wording, but what I would put in there, so see where it says terms and conditions, if you edit this document, and you could do it individually for each one, or you could change the full-on document by going to the document editor, which we have another training coming up later on mastering the document editor, but you could put in your terms and conditions, and you might say for this estimate, by signing this agreement, you agree to these terms and conditions listed below. And in one of those terms and conditions, you might say, this price was generated based on online tools we have available to us. And we did our best to get our prices accurately, get our price as close as we could possibly get it. But we reserve the right to adjust your price after how many ever days, after so many visits. Maybe it's 4, maybe it's 6, maybe it's 1, maybe it's 2. One of the things I put in there was, if this is a lawn mowing quote, I had an estimate document just for lawn mowing, but I put in there, if we arrive at your property and your grass is over 6 inches tall, then our first service will be based on an hourly rate and not the flat rate provided here. The flat rate would then take effect after our first visit is over. So your first charge might be, way higher than normal because we're trying to get your lawn into shape. I just wrote that out and made people basically agree to it. Now, part of the sales process and the communication and your responsibility as a business owner would be making sure they understand that and communicate that to them. Like, if the only time they ever saw it was in the fine print on the bottom of a thing that they were just excited about the price to agree, that might not be the best place to only have that mentioned. It might be in a follow-up email that reminds them and says, hey, your first service is scheduled. We just want to remind you that if your grass is way too tall and we get there because you said it got serviced last week, but it really, your lawnmower broke 3 weeks ago and you just don't think it's that tall, which happens more times than not. What was the last thing you cut it? Oh, I think it was like last week. Well, when did your mower break? Oh, about a month ago. So your grass hasn't been cut in a month. Well, yeah, basically, but it hasn't grown. It's not that tall. And you get there and it's going to take you 3 hours to cut their grass. So you charge them by the hour. But you know what I'm saying? Like you have to manage that ahead of time. And you're not going to be able to account for that with a measurement that you get from measuring square footage. Does that make sense? I hope that part clears that part up to what people, because I think that's the biggest worry some people have. Or like Thad said, he got there in the backyard had a huge slope that he couldn't see from the overhead views. And they were going to lose a ton of money if they didn't, because they had to send a different crew there with a different mower and everything else. So put that in your terms and say, hey, if we get there in the properties, we'll either contact you at the door and let you know what the new price will be. And you can decide if you want us to keep cutting the grass that day, or we're going to do it for this price. And then we reserve the right to adjust it. And we'll call you and change the price and or we'll send you another email with what the new price is going to be based on the conditions we found the property in or whatever. I don't know. The worry here that you're going to have, Holly, I think specifically to your husband, John, if you said that was his name, I think.
Yes, correct.
The worry here is you're going to think that you're going to either underbid or lose a bunch of jobs. Now, like you're not going to give somebody an annual agreement quoted price that you're going to be locked in for a year, losing a bunch of money this way. You can use the data and the points to help guide that and help shape what you're going to charge people. But you're going to simplify your pricing and your strategy for pricing based on data. And you're going to find that more times than not, you're going to come out ahead than what you're losing. And the ones that you lose on, you just figure out a way to make it to where you're limited on your losses. So maybe it's 1 or 2 visits, that kind of thing. On like a typical lawn mowing type job, residential maintenance, 6 visits, if you're off by a couple bucks, then you're not losing money. Like if you're that close on your margin, then you need to be charging more anyway, right? So if you're off by a little bit, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're off, then that's what you look at and you learn and say, okay, why was I off? Was I off because my numbers are a little bit off? Or was I off because this 1 yard was trickier than normal? Like I mentioned before, maybe they have a trampoline, or maybe they had a pool put in that you didn't see that now you have to trim around. Those kinds of things is what's going to make you off. And it's not because you're so far off on your numbers. Now, the other challenge here, and Thad, you might have to deal with this more. I don't know how big of properties you're having, but sometimes those numbers incrementally don't scale to larger type properties. Like for instance, almost all of my yards were 10,000 square feet or below inside the city. But if we went out to any of the neighborhoods, like we cut 1 yard that was 3 acres, and my price matrix based on, between less than 30,000 square feet on an acreage property, my price was so astronomically high that there's no way I could have quoted the guy like $1,100 a mow, but that's what my numbers were spitting out based on what I was calculating. And so I had to adjust it for him and for those individual circumstances, or figure out and build a different rate matrix and say, okay, if I do get a 2 acre property, how long did it take me to cut it? What should I be charging? Maybe it's by the man hour, whatever it is, what numbers, how do I get the rate matrix to spit it out when I have a larger property size? And you could build a different rate matrix for a different service. So I might not quote residential lawn maintenance standard premium or basic pack plans. I might say, have a new one called residential acreage type jobs. You just build a different service that you then add and use that service with its matrix to price your services. Does that sound useful? Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's not a one-stop shop. Like I think that's the thing I put in the blog post I wrote, and it's not going to solve every problem and give you 100% guaranteed pricing. Like there's just no way around it. You're going to use this as a starting point and a basis for figuring out how to price services quickly. But as you can see, if you had, for instance, and I can't get this screen to go away. let me just close this. No, I don't want to save it because I didn't change anything. But if you had in here, because then the next thing you do is you build a template in here and you add all of those services that you want to price based on that square footage, which I don't know why Scott has a million templates, but if you based all of those services that you wanted to price off of square footage. So let's say you measured for mulch and you could build mulch, you could build, you know, like weeding and stuff like that, like whatever services you want to add, you could build a template that pulls all of those services up. And when you add that template, it'll add in and show you what the starting point price is. So even if John wants to go out and look at jobs, you could still build the template for him to look at the estimate when he gets there and say, okay, this is what our matrix says we should be pricing this mowing service at. Do you agree with it? Does it need to be a little bit more? And you start to adjust it as you go, and then you'll know if you need to adjust your numbers. Or if you can trust them, then you start to trust them, and then you stop going out at all. Like I literally got to the point where if I had to go look at your property, I was going to charge you because I'm not coming to look at your property for anything. If you wanted bush trimming or anything else that was extra, the only people we did that for was people we were maintaining their lawn. And so you had to agree to a lawn price. And then when my guys were there the first time, they would assess the property and fill out a form and tell me how long they thought the bush, you know, they would fill that out when they were there the first time. I'd have my crew leader do it while the other guys were cutting the grass or whatever. And you build that process out instead of you going out and spending a bunch of time estimating yards for work that you may not win anyway. And so you just start to build processes around how those types of things work. Okay.
Makes sense. Thank you. This has been helpful.
I hope so. I mean, I hope I wasn't just like rambling on about stuff. Like I wanted to try and, like I said, keep this before useful, but also, I don't know. The matrix, it can be tricky. It can be hard, but I think if I can wrap up one way by saying, don't be afraid of it. Like there's nothing in here that you could possibly do at all that it would break, like it's not going to make you price your service. Like there's nothing that happens. If I go to add this job, like even if I do a one-time job and I add that service in, so if I add in maintenance, so the estimate's the best place to see any of this. But you see right here where it shows matrix, estimate, chemical, contract, prepay, default, it'll tell you if you have a matrix price when you go to add this, because it'll say, okay, based on this matrix price maintenance, it should be it'll give you a rate that it'll fill. So if I add this one, it's not going to put the default rate, which is 0. It's going to add $61.33 because that's what the rate matrix is generating. Now the estimate will show you why it's doing it, and you can play with the numbers to see how it makes sense. It doesn't work that way when you schedule jobs, and that's why I don't generally show people this even to start with, but sometimes not even at all, because you should be scheduling it from the estimate that's one. But if you go and edit this way, you can see that where there's matrix pricing for services, right? And so if you had a different matrix built, you could see what that price would be based on that matrix because of that service. And maybe that's what you call the service, like rate matrix test 1, rate matrix test 2, so that you know what you're looking at and you work on those numbers. But even if I put this one down and I say, this is the service we're doing, it says $55, unless you save it and schedule it and complete it and invoice it, it doesn't have to be $55. You could change it to anything you want. So it's not like your customers are going to get locked in on a price. Like you still have full control. And that's what I ended the blog post with, was it's just a starting point. You can use it to say, okay, here's what the matrix said based on numbers we've used in the past, what we should be charging. I don't think this one's enough. I need to charge them $70. And you just change it and then save it. And now you got the job scheduled, whether it's complete or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, when you pull it up like that, it's on that customer, right? And so it knows if you save the square footage, then it's gonna automatically pull that in, and that's how it's giving you the rate, right?
Yep. It's any of those ones that have, so this customer here only has a net square footage number. So any of those prices that were showing up for that job, those jobs in the service list that I was pulling down, any of these that have matrix prices, which it's way down here below, any of these, those I know instantly because this customer was the only number we saved for them was net square footage. But all of those matrices are pulling that price from the net square footage. If you had matrices built out for any other services that use, like in the instance of mulch. So for instance, we didn't have mulch square foot, mulch cubic yards. There's no number saved in here. So if I go to add that job, the one-time job for mulch. So mulch flat rate. Oh, it does show a matrix. Probably because we saved it on the, oh no, that's the estimate price. So it's loading the price from the estimate. You probably couldn't tell that, but because the columns don't line up, but this is pulling it from an estimate we already created. But see how it has no
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But watch this. If I go in and I edit the mulch square footage now under custom fields, and I hit Command F and find mulch, because I don't want to have to search. Why isn't it finding mulch cubic yards? Why didn't it find it? That was weird. And I put in 6 and I save it here. So, oh crap, I can't save it. There's too much stuff changed. I converted it to a lead instead of a client instead of a lead. Now it needs an email address and everything else. I don't feel like changing it. But if it had a mulch cubic yards, then when I added that mulch service, it would show a matrix price, which in this case I put 6, so it's going to be 510 anyway, but it would show a matrix price there too.
John.
Yes.
The mulch cubic yards, that the line item that you were just scrolling through where you just hit Control F and found that's stuff that's got to be added to something. Where do you go to add that stuff?
Oh, the custom fields?
Yeah. Okay. So it's custom fields
Yeah.
where you add that stuff. Cause all I have in mine is net square footage.
Yeah. If you come to your settings and type in custom, and then it's in CRM custom fields.
Okay.
You add those here, and you can add as many as you want to keep track of. But yeah, if you don't have anything here, then that's where you got to save those first.
Okay.
And then you could save any number you want, and then you could build any rate matrix off of that number. But yeah,
okay,
that's the starting point. Okay, guys, I've gone way over. I know we started late, so it's still been 2 hours for most of you. But I definitely went way over time. So I want to be mindful of letting you guys, I'm happy to answer any other questions if you guys have more. But I don't want to make you feel like I'm keeping you hostage either. So does anybody have any other questions or?
I don't. I think this has been super helpful and I really appreciate it. And I probably, sorry, my daughter's screaming for me, so I do have to let you go, but I'll probably reach out to you maybe to talk about your services.
Okay, yeah, because one of the things we're starting to offer that Justin and them didn't do before, but just because like if we wanted to spend time and go into your account and I could help you build this stuff out, we do charge an hourly rate for that, but that we have it available now because I can do that. Before we were building out like automations and systems and stuff, but I can just do like a training. Thad, didn't we do one with that? We used some of your time, right? One of the months where I just trained on Service Autopilot. So we could do that with the rate matrix. So if you want to sit down one day and but you still have to come with the data. So if we want to pull some numbers, we look at the reports, whatever, we could, if maybe it's not the rate matrix anymore because you know how to do it. Maybe it's something else, but we definitely have that capability for sure. So yeah, definitely reach out or get on like that is on one of our plans, and we can use some of our build time for the month for some of these things too. There's definitely a bunch of different options.
Okay, great. Thanks. And if you want to email me, some of that information with pricing and everything, I would greatly appreciate that as well.
Yeah, I'll make a note. Steve is our sort of sales guy with that stuff. So he might reach out. I'll have him reach out and follow up and see about, just giving you some ideas of what we offer and what we charge, because he handles all that stuff. I just do the parts I know.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thanks.
Thanks, Ollie. Tell your husband thanks too, and you guys enjoy.
Yeah, I will. Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thad, I'm ending this too for everybody. So if you're good, do you have any other questions?
Yeah, man, I'm good. I mean, I have a ton of other questions, but I may trade some of my time out sometime to do something different because I need my stuff's not organized, and like if I had to bring an office assistant in now or have even have my wife do it, like everything's so scattered in my Service Autopilot because because I have to do so much stuff all at one time because it's just really me doing it all. I would probably be okay with trading some time out, maybe 1 week, a month or something, and trying to get something straight because I don't even have, like you're telling your different services that you had, like my services, like I got 4 different mulch services, and then I have a mulch package, and my stuff's just so scattered out that I'll never be. Right now, I won't be able to ever bring anybody in to help me because it'll take me 2 months to train them.
Yeah. Well, some of that's where I think Ready Business Systems can help. And I know I can help you is consolidating that and building out a process. Because like you said, you've just been doing what you know you needed to do to get it done. But to be able to get somebody to help you, I'm sure it was the same. Like you have crews that go cut grass, right?
Yeah, I have 2 crews that go cut grass, and I'm trying to focus more time in the office, but well, I don't know. You probably know about that transition. That transition is not beautiful.
No, and especially if you're a field guy, like if that's what you're good at is being out in the field, the office stuff is harder to transition to because you can't show somebody how you make a mess of it because they're gonna go, what?
Exactly.
But, see, and that's where I was good in the office. I wanted to hire somebody that could go do the work part and do it. Like I liked cutting grass and stuff, but as soon as I could do the office, like I like the office part of the work.
I like the office part. I like the freedom of the office, but at the same time, I'm probably more skilled in the field. I just don't particularly like it. Like I tell people all the time, I don't like mowing. Like mowing's not my thing. The business of landscaping is my thing.
Yeah.
So I like the relationships and the selling and all that stuff. So, but the organizations, I've never had a job that I had to organize anything. So I was capable out in the field. I'm lost in the office.
Yeah. And that's where, again, that's where I know we can help. I definitely can help Ready Business Systems. Like we can automate some of this stuff, like obviously the pricing and different things other than with the matrix. But once we have it set
Justin's
up,
already worked with me on the pricing stuff. It's just now getting it from, I know what my hourly rate is to now getting it to where once I meet the client, like I'm doing good to get an estimate out in 10 days because I don't have anything process set up and people will give me stuff and I just don't even know how to price it.
Yeah. I think we can help. We definitely can. So yeah, if we can swap out or use some of your time or if we want to do, I don't think Steve and Justin and I have fully fleshed out like what it looks like. If we don't want to steal dedicated like build time, because I don't think we need to charge as much for the other parts as we charge for the automations, because that is a lot more technical and work consumed. I feel like like the Service Autopilot stuff and cleaning things up, I think we could do that cheaper.
Okay. And I would be willing to even discuss, you know, if I need to do it separately, like if I need to do an extra meeting with you instead and do it like that and leave my regular time, you know, because I've benefited tenfold from just the stuff they're doing, but this stuff right here makes it where I'm trying to make my office where if I do want to put somebody in it and I want to move out to sales, then I can put somebody at it.
Yep. And that I think we could do that. And I think that might actually be the better option is have like almost like a Service Autopilot thing where that we meet once every week or every 2 weeks or something and go over something next and then leave you with some homework and say, okay, now go work on this. Cause it's not that I don't even think it's beneficial if we just do it for you.
No, it's not. Cause I won't know how to do it. I mean, like right now I have a problem with, I'm trying to convert my mowing stuff to visit pricing instead of, because I'm tired of my guys calling me 50 times saying, well, this yard don't look like it needs to be mowed. So I'm converting it to like a visit price. We go there, we get you pay us say it's $50. You pay us $50 whether we mow or not, but we're going to do bed work and weeding and that kind of stuff while we're there if we don't mow or
Okay.
whatnot. So
Yeah.
I heard there's a Costa Day something in Charlotte and here in North Carolina. They have a visit price where it's not so there's too many questions. I mean, I get too many phone calls about, my guys are calling me saying, oh, well, do we need to mow this? Well, then if they don't mow it, we don't make any money on it. So I think they need to do work there, find something to do there, and then leave, and then us get paid for it.
Right. Yeah. And but that's the kind of stuff, man, like then we can go through. Some of that is just setting expectations, but you build that out into your documents and your
exactly. And that's what I was getting at, is that my documents are set up and I'm needing my documents to change. And because I didn't go through the process of changing my documents, now I don't know how to change my documents.
Right.
So
Yeah.
because RBS set up all my documents.
Well, they set up a lot of them, yeah, but that's let me look at my thing. Hold on one second, because I think that's coming up. Is that my next? Justin and I, just to be honest, and let me stop the recording real quick.
Yeah.